Good evening. I'm recovering from a cold, so my voice is not functioning well tonight. So, if any of you are joining this class for the first time, I'll just explain a little what we're doing. We usually start with a meditation for 20-30 minutes, and then a bit of talk and question and answer if any of you have questions. And then we have a short break, and then after the break, I'm going through some basic Buddhist subjects, just explaining some of the basic ideas, beliefs, tenets of the Buddhist path. And so it's sort of a continuation. I've been doing this for a number of weeks now, so I'm kind of continuing from one week to the next. So for tonight's meditation, actually the subject that was supposed to be for tonight was loving kindness and compassion. But because I ran out of time last week and wasn't able to finish what I was supposed to talk about last week, I'm going to continue that tonight. But I thought we could do a meditation on loving kindness and compassion. And traditionally, in the Buddhist tradition, as it comes to us from Asia, from the Asian teachers, when they talk about love and compassion, generating these positive states of mind, they talk about it in terms of others, generating love and compassion for others. They usually don't talk about generating love and compassion for yourself. But over the years, like in the last few decades, as Buddhism has been growing in the West, because many people in the West have a problem with not feeling good about themselves, and some people even go as far as hating themselves and being very self-critical, self-judgmental, and apparently this problem doesn't exist much, if at all, in Asian cultures. So there's been this awareness that in the West, when we meditate on loving kindness and compassion, we need to include ourselves and not only generate it for others. So we need to practice, train ourselves, learn to feel good about ourselves. And this is important because in Buddhism, as in all major religion and spiritual traditions, there's a lot of emphasis on loving others and being kind to others and having compassion for others and so on. And it is, of course, very important to have these qualities. But if we try to feel love and compassion for others, but we don't have it for ourselves, and instead if we are very critical of ourselves, hateful towards ourselves, then that actually becomes a hindrance to really feeling love and compassion for others. Because if we are hateful towards ourselves, critical towards ourselves, it's because we see certain things in ourselves that we don't like, and that we are, we don't accept, we don't like, we're critical, we're judgmental about those particular qualities or traits. So if we're like that with ourselves, then when we see other people who are similar to ourselves, who have the similar traits and qualities and behavior and so on, then we'll have the same attitude towards them that we have towards ourselves, which is being critical and hateful and judgmental. And then that becomes an obstacle to having real unconditional love and compassion for others. So that's one sort of problem that can occur because of self-hatred and self-judgmentalness. But another thing is that just within the practice of meditation itself, if we have attitudes of kind of being hard on ourselves, being mean to ourselves, beating ourselves up, always pointing out our faults and so forth, then that makes our mind disturbed and unpeaceful when we're trying to meditate. So kind of, it's like there's a war going on inside, and that's not very healthy. And can't really have a good peaceful meditation if there's a war going on inside your mind. So, so this is something we need to look out for. And it may not be the case that everybody has this problem, but many people do. And sometimes it might be there, but without noticing it, you know, like sometimes it's there your whole life, and it's so much part of you, so much your nature, that you don't even kind of realize it until it's pointed out. So it's good to just observe your mind, and if you do notice this kind of self-deprecating, self-criticizing, self-judging kind of voice, you know, the way you talk to yourself, you know, always pointing out your faults and so on, then that's a sign that you do have this problem, at least some of the times. And the solution to this is to cultivate love and kindness towards yourself. So that's why I thought tonight in the meditation that we would do that kind of meditation. Usually we have been doing meditation on the breath in these Tuesday night talks. But I thought that maybe tonight we'd do something a little different. Do a meditation on loving kindness, compassion, starting with ourselves, and then extending those same feelings to others. Now, sometimes people, when they try to do this type of meditation, where you're asked to generate a feeling of love, compassion, kindness, and so on, sometimes people say, I don't feel anything. Yeah, which, yeah, it's understandable that that could be somewhat disappointing. You know, if we're doing meditation on loving kindness, we want to be able to feel it. But don't worry if you're not able to actually feel something in meditation. Sometimes it's just a question of time. It takes time. It takes some practice at this type of meditation before you start to feel the actual feeling. So don't be discouraged if you don't feel it. It's good enough, if you have the feeling that it's good enough just to try to do the meditation, just to like say the words to yourself. You know, you mention some words that you can say to yourself to generate this feeling of love and compassion. So it's enough just to say those words to yourself and try to generate the feeling. But if it doesn't come, that's okay, don't worry. If you keep doing it, I can say this, you know, with confidence because it's my experience. You keep doing the practice, eventually you get to the point where it does happen. You do feel it. So that's why I think it was last week I was talking about how important it is not to have expectations when practicing meditation. Ideally, it's best to just practice, just do the practice, but without grasping at, hoping for, wishing for, expecting a certain type of experience to occur during the meditation. So having that kind of attitude of expecting, hoping, wishing, grasping for something to happen, that itself can sometimes set up a sort of obstacle to being able to just have the experience to just happen. So it's best to just try to relax and let go of the expectations. Just try to do the practice, and you might get some nice feeling, you might not, doesn't matter. It's okay, it's good enough just to do the practice and try to be happy with whatever result does come from doing the meditation. Okay, so start by making yourselves comfortable, and if you can, keep your back straight. Keeping the back straight is helpful for the mind to be most clear and focused and awake and alert. But although we want to keep our back straight, that doesn't mean that our body should be tight and tense. Instead, it's really important to be relaxed as much as possible. So just bring your mind, your awareness into your body. In other words, become aware of what's happening in your body. Just pay attention to whatever sensations you notice. And if you notice tension, tightness in any part of your body, see if you can let it go. One thing you could do is imagine that it melts and flows down and just sinks into the earth below us. And there it just disappears. So you don't need to worry about it anymore. Just let it go. So let all the tension drain out of you, leaving your body feeling as light and free of tension as possible. Another thing that's helpful is to take a couple of deep breaths, breathing in slowly and deeply, and then breathing out slowly. And you can imagine if there's any remaining tension in your body or in your mind, imagine that it goes out with the exhalation of the breath. So just do that for a couple of breaths, 2 or 3 breaths, and then just resume your normal rate of breathing. So now for the next few minutes, just continue to pay attention to the breath coming in and going out. Do your best to stay focused on the breath and notice if other thoughts pop up in your mind, which they probably will. There might be thoughts about things that happened to you during the day today, or thoughts about what you're going to do later tonight or tomorrow. Thoughts about people, thoughts about your work, your problems. So it's completely normal that these thoughts come up in our mind. And we can't really stop them from coming up. So just let them come. But you can stop yourself from getting caught up thinking the thoughts. So you can say to yourself, well, that's a thought. Put it aside, let it go, and come back to the breath. Even if it seems like something really important that you really need to think about, you don't have to do it now. You can do it later when we finish here tonight. Just decide to keep your mind right here in the present moment and present place, feeling away your breath coming in and going out, and let go of all other thoughts. So give yourself permission to have a break from your usual busy thoughts, busy pattern of thinking in your mind. Just take a break from that. So now ask yourself if you ever notice thoughts inside your mind that are self-critical, self-judgmental, or even self-hating. Are you hard on yourself when you make a mistake? Do you think that you're hopeless, worthless? Do you treat yourself badly, unkindly? So even if such thoughts or attitudes arise just occasionally, still it's something unhealthy and unhelpful in the spiritual path. So just as it's important to be kind, compassionate, caring, patient with others, it's also important to have those attitudes towards oneself. So in Buddhism, there are lots of meditations on increasing love and compassion. So we'll use some of these ideas in trying to develop more love and compassion for ourselves. So start by going into your heart, into your mind, and seeing if you can get in touch with a feeling there of wanting to be happy and wanting to not suffer. You might see it as a little voice inside that just says, I just want to be happy. I don't want to be unhappy. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to have problems. So the Tibetan lamas always say that all living beings, all sentient beings, want happiness and do not want suffering. So this is something we all have in common, and it's not wrong, it's not bad to feel that way. It's just completely normal, completely natural for human beings, for living beings to feel that way. So see if you can just accept that you have that feeling within you, and it's not wrong, it's not bad. According to Buddha's teachings, we actually deserve to be happy and shouldn't have to suffer. Suffering happens because of ignorance, confusion, disturbing emotions, karma. So all of these things are basically mistaken, erroneous. And it's not really our fault that we have these disturbing emotions in our mind. We didn't choose to be this way. We just inherited these from our previous lives. We were born with them because of what we did, what we had in past lives. So it's not our fault, it's not anybody's fault. It's just the natural process of cause and effect. But we can change this situation. Buddhism says we all have the potential to become free from suffering, from ignorance, from delusions, from karma, from all these negative factors. We don't have to live with them forever. We can be free from them. And we can achieve a state of peace and happiness, freedom, fulfillment of all our positive potential. So see if you can accept that it's possible to transform yourself, to transform your mind so that it gradually becomes free of all the problems, disturbing emotions, and gradually becomes more and more peaceful and happy and positive. And try to feel that you have the right to achieve that. You deserve that. So if it's difficult to really feel that, try saying to yourself words like, may I be happy. May I experience peace and happiness, all positive thoughts and emotions. And may I be free of suffering and problems and all the disturbing emotions. So just say those words to yourself and try to really feel it. Wish yourself happiness and being free of suffering. Another thing you might try is to think that there are enlightened beings, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are on the way to enlightenment, who are aware of us and of all living beings. And in their minds, there's only love and compassion, patience, forgiveness, not the tiniest bit of aversion or anger or judgmentalness or criticalness. So no negative emotions, no negative thoughts, only loving, compassionate thoughts. So Lama Rinpoche says, you are never alone. Wherever you are, all the time, there are many, many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are looking at you, who are aware of you, looking at you with love and compassion, total acceptance, total unconditional love. So if that's something you can accept, even tentatively, then see if you can imagine that. See if you can imagine there are many, many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas looking at you right now. It's just total, pure, unconditional love and compassion. And not the tiniest bit of anger, aversion, criticalness, judgmentalness. So try to imagine how you appear in their eyes. So as I mentioned before, don't worry if you're not able to actually feel something in this meditation. Don't expect that. It's enough just to contemplate these ideas. Now let's move on to generating these feelings of love and compassion for others. So let's start with one person, someone that we already feel positive feelings towards, someone we find easy to love, easy to like, easy to care about. So it could be someone in your family, your partner, your child, parent, sibling, friend, or even a pet. Some people find it easier to love an animal than to love people. So it doesn't matter who it is. So Just bring to mind one person like that, one being like that. And you can imagine that person in front of you right here, right now. Or you can just think of wherever they are right now. And then contemplate that this person is basically just like you. They have within their mind or their heart the same feeling that you do, wanting to be happy and not wanting to suffer, not wanting to have problems, bad experiences. Now see if you can go one step further than that and wish that this person could have happiness, could be happy, have good experiences, and wish them to be free of suffering and problems and bad experiences. And again, don't worry if you don't actually feel those feelings. You can just say the words to yourself, like, may you be happy, may you be free of suffering, and whatever words you like to use. And it's also nice to think of specific things that will make the person happy. And you can imagine yourself giving those things to the person, or just imagine the person getting those things, having those things coming into their life. And that can include even the most basic things like the kind of food they like to eat and kind of clothes they like to wear and other kinds of material things. But you can also think about what kind of inner thoughts, feelings, states of mind will enable a person to be really happy and not unhappy. So just use your imagination. Think of the specific things that will help the person be happy and imagine those things happening to them. if you can, imagine the person looking happy, being happy. Now, let's try the same with another person, but this time someone we're not so close to. Someone we know and we don't hate them, we don't have aversion for them, but maybe a little bit more distant from us. Bring to mind someone like that. It could be, again, someone in your family, or it could be a neighbor, or someone you work with. So choose that person, and then you can imagine them in front of you, or just think of wherever they are right now. So just really focus on that person and think about how this person is basically the same as you and the same as the other person you thought about before. Deep in their mind and their heart, they have the wish to be happy and to not suffer, to not be unhappy, to not have bad experiences. Then try to go the next step and feel the wish for this person to be happy and to not suffer, to not have problems. And again, if it's hard to really feel that way, you just say to yourself words like, may you be happy, may you be free of suffering, or how wonderful it would be, how nice it would be if you could be happy, if you could be free of problems and bad experiences. And as before, try to imagine what kinds of things would make the person happy, enable the person to be happy. And imagine either giving those things to the person or just imagining those things coming into their life. And visualize the person looking happy, being happy. So now, to end the meditation, let's just for a few moments contemplate that there are many people, many beings around us, all over the world, all over the planet. And each one of us is unique, different from everyone else. But there are certain things we all have in common. And this is one. All of us have a mind, consciousness, awareness. And within our mind, we all want happiness and don't want suffering, pain, problems. We want good experiences, we don't want bad experiences. So this is something you can accept. If it makes sense to you, then you might want to make a kind of wish that you could continue to remember this, to be aware of this, so that when you are dealing with people, the people around you, that you can have this awareness that they want to be happy and don't want to suffer just like you, and that could affect your feelings towards them and the way you behave towards them, so that you have more concern, more consideration, more care. So the usual and the traditional ways of teaching meditation, loving kindness and compassion, it's recommended that we start with people or beings that we find easy to have good feelings towards. So start with your enemies, otherwise you won't be very successful. So start with the easy ones, and work on cultivating these positive feelings towards them, and then after some time you can move on to people who are a little more distant from you. Sometimes they call this kind of person strangers. So they could be absolute strangers, people you don't know at all. Or they could be just people you're not close to. And then with more practice, more experience, then you can start working on the people that you don't really like, have difficulty having good feelings for. But again, even then, better not to start with the worst enemy of all, but start with the ones that you just have some mild dislike or irritation towards, and then gradually move on to more and more difficult ones. And then eventually you'll be able to, because of experiencing this meditation, these states of mind with easier people, then it gets easier to feel it for the really difficult ones, people who may do horrible things to you or horrible things to other people. So that really makes sense to do it in a gradual way like that, sort of building up our ability to love and feel compassion for more and more difficult people. So it's a process. It's not something we can do all at once, but gradually over time, the more we work on generating these thoughts, making our mind familiar with these thoughts. Gradually it becomes just like second nature, just our natural way of feeling, our natural way of relating to others. And then it's such a nice thing, so beneficial for you, also beneficial for others. It's good for you because these are such beautiful states of mind. So it makes you feel good and good for your health as well. But it's also good for others because it means the way you are with them, the way you treat them, and so on will be more likely to satisfy their needs and their wishes and bring happiness to them. Okay, and again, don't leave yourself out. Don't develop love and compassion for everyone in the universe except me. I don't deserve it. Okay, any questions?
I'm a little curious.
Huh?
I'm a little curious about this transition from thought meditation to feeling meditation. You said with practice comes the feeling. You start contemplating it, and then you said from your own experience you actually start feeling it. Could you try and talk a little bit about that process?
Well, I guess it's head and heart, isn't it?
I'm a guy. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm caught up in analytical meditation all the time. So I'm kind of.
Well, you love your children, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you feel love for your children, is that in your head? Is that up here?
I think so. Somehow or other, it's still in my head.
Really?
It's still something I feel obliged to do, and it's it is.
Really, you don't feel it here?
I don't know where this is. Everybody goes, the heart, and I keep going. Okay, this is this physical thing that's pumping blood around and stuff like that, huh? And I'm really a little confused about this heart process, yeah. This feeling of the heart, warmth and tingling and stuff like this. For me, things are practical. It's
Okay.
and very much caught up in the thought process.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's why I'm asking you. I hope you do.
It's just in huh? Yeah. Well, I guess just for me personally, when I had a hard time when I was young to feel love, and so when I came across Tibetan Buddhism, and there's a lot of talk about love and compassion, and Lama Yeshe is this incredibly loving, warm, really heart kind of person, and it was a bit overwhelming for me at first, because I'm much more up here in my head, and I was really attracted to Buddhism for that reason, all the analytical, intellectual, the way of explaining things, analytical meditation and so on. When it came to the emotional part, it was real hard for me. But finally, after a number of years, it started seeping down into here, and I was able to start feeling it here. And I think it was mainly because of Lama Yeshe, because he embodied it. He really embodied love and compassion. His Holiness does. I mean, all the lamas do. They all do. Don't you feel it with them when you're with them? Yeah. So, I don't know. For me, it was an experience, an actual transition that I went through. I remember I used to be very much in my head, and it was almost like I was just unaware from here down. But slowly over the years that changed. So, I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, but I'm really happy that it happened to me, that I was able to really feel it here. I think that's very important. Because that's something that Buddhism is, like they say, the two wings of the bird. There's the wisdom side and the compassion side, and you need both. You definitely need wisdom to have a good understanding of how things are and clear up the confusion and the misconceptions, but you also need the compassion, the love, the warmth, the caring, the human side, so that when you see somebody suffering, you're willing to get in there and help them. I mean, even with an intellectual understanding, you might still do that, but it's not the same. When you can train a robot to recognize somebody who's just having a heart attack and they need to be helped and so on, but will they have the feeling, the empathy, the compassion there? You must have feelings.
Because I'm caught up in my thoughts a lot. Yeah, there's this paradox between thinking about feelings and feeling feelings. Yeah. So I think I'm feeling a feeling, which is thinking, instead of just feeling a feeling, which kind of is a little confusing for the thought process. Yeah? So I get doing things and I have action, so I can act empathically with other people or with understanding and stuff. But the feeling, that actual feeling of this is empathetic, or this is sympathetic, or this is love, I'm kind of a little confused, because there's this, I have this idea that there's a being thing, love, and then there's a thinking thing, love. Yeah. And when I'm thinking about love, then I'm thinking. When I'm in love, then I can't think. Does this make sense? There must be somebody to explain this to me without me thinking about it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we do. I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but we do need to be careful, because sometimes people are just in their feelings and they don't have the wisdom side of it.
That's a good thing. That's what women.
Well, I don't think we should make such a black and white. Guys do it too.
Do we?
Yeah. I know this man who has been in jail most of his life because when he was 19 years old, he killed somebody. He said, I mean, the way he explained it was he would just feel something and act on it. Without thinking. So he ended up committing a murder. So I don't think it's just women. I think a lot of guys just act on their feelings without thinking clearly too. So the ideal thing is to have the two in balance, in wisdom and method. There's the feelings, but there's also wisdom, knowing, well, what's the best way to deal with this situation, rather than just blindly acting. Although I guess it's at some point it can just become so spontaneous. It's not like you really have to think, now what should I do here? But you just know what's right. I guess. I mean, I'm still working on that myself. But this is what they call skillful means. Skillful means, as I understand it, is when you can have those two things in balance, wisdom and compassion, and they're working together in a harmonious way, and you can just act in the appropriate ways in whatever is needed in a situation. So that's one of the qualities of a Buddha. But I think we can also develop it ourselves as we go along.
Maybe there's something about the language as well that we use. I have a background with language. I got into this appropriate behavior. Seems sometimes a little bit more appropriate language to use than loving kindness, for example. Yeah. So it's because this I think sometimes with appropriate behavior, there's a lot of wisdom and there's a lot of compassion both in that. What is in fact appropriate behavior? Instead of acting in a loving kindness, for example, which I haven't got a clue about. It's supposed to be a feeling, but I think I have a feeling about appropriate behavior, because then I can feel what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in situations, because I feel bad about it if I do something inappropriate, and I feel something that's okay, that was appropriate in an appropriate situation.
Yeah, I just remembered in the book by Sharon Salzberg.
Yeah.
About loving kindness. You
Mhm.
read that?
No, but I know.
Yeah, it's called Loving Kindness, the
Mhm.
Revolutionary Art of Happiness.
Mhm.
And there, I mean, most of the book is about loving kindness. It's great.
Mhm.
And she says loving kindness is a state of mind. It's not an emotion, it's a state of mind. I think that's the ideal thing. Like you're in this state of mind where you're just aware that every person, every being deserves your care and your attention. You know? So it's not like you're all overwhelmed by these feelings, these emotions, but you're just really focused on the needs of others and you care about them and you're acting, or as much as possible,
Mhm.
acting appropriately.
Appropriate.
But
That makes sense.
I think ideally there should still be some feeling there, it's not just a mechanical thing like you're acting like a robot. I would think so. It's like I said, this is what you feel with the lamas.
Hmm.
You know, you don't feel like they're just acting mechanically. You feel something there. Okay, let's have a break. 10 minutes. There's coffee and biscuits and whatever upstairs. So the topic for last week's talk was meant to be reincarnation and karma, which are both really big topics. But, we ended up spending most of the time talking about other things, so I didn't have time to talk about them. But I'll just mention a little bit about them tonight, because they are controversial. Many people in the West have difficulty accepting these topics, but they are important in the context of the Buddhist path, because as you probably heard from the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, according to Buddhism, there's a lot of concern about suffering and why we suffer, where does suffering come from, and how to overcome suffering, stop suffering, become free of suffering. So there's a lot of concern about suffering and being free of suffering. And the Buddhist explanation
out of battery. I think. Yeah. You would go.
Take this good.
So in the Buddhist explanation of why we suffer and where does our suffering come from and what we need to do to be free of our suffering, then these topics of karma and reincarnation come about. And when I was living in Singapore many years ago, I met a man there who told me that he spent quite a bit of time thinking about why things happen the way they do. And he did it in a kind of systematic way. He said he came up with 3 possible explanations for things. Why do good things happen? Why do bad things happen? So he said one possible explanation is that there's a God who has created everything and makes everything happen. Another possibility is there's no reason. Things just happen by chance. So if some good thing happens, it's your good luck. If bad things happen, well, too bad, bad luck. So there's no reason, no order, no causes and conditions for why things happen the way they do. And then the third option was karma. And that involves ourselves, our mind specifically, acting in certain ways, and because of the way we act, then we create the causes for certain results to come about. So he couldn't think of any other possible explanations for things besides those 3. And after thinking about them, then he decided that for himself, the one that made the most sense was the third one, karma. The other 2 just didn't make sense to him. So this guy was a lawyer, I think. He kind of quite analytical mind. And I thought that made a lot of sense to go through that process of really investigating. And I think Buddha would approve of this as well, because the Buddha always said that we shouldn't just blindly believe what we are told by him or by anybody else, but instead should investigate things for ourselves. But then, nevertheless, even though Buddha said we should think for ourselves, check things for ourselves, still he did give his own explanation of things, but it wasn't just something that he invented, but it was based on his own experience. This is the belief in Buddhism, that the Buddha achieved this state of mind that was able to see everything just the way it is, everything that's happening, exactly how and why. And so he had this, what we call omniscient mind. And so it's based on that, very expansive, open, clear, undiluted mind that he explained the origin of suffering. Where does suffering come from? How does it come about? How to become free of suffering? So, so the Buddhist teaching says that we don't have just one life, and then at the end of our life, everything stops, everything goes out of existence, not just our body, but also our mind. Instead, some part of us, which is actually a part of our mind, doesn't stop existing, even though our body dies. But some part of our mind continues to exist. And then if we haven't attained nirvana or enlightenment, then we will take rebirth. We will be born again. And the process of how we take birth, where we take birth, what kind of life we have, what kind of experiences we have, and so on, are mainly the result of our karma. So it's not up to somebody else to decide where we are born, but it's our karma. So people ask for proof, for evidence of this. And there is actually quite a bit of I don't know if evidence is the right word, but at least there's material that supports the view of reincarnation, or at least there's material supporting the continuation of something after death, as opposed to a totally materialistic view that says when a person dies, that's it. Nothing goes on, nothing survives, nothing continues to exist. And there's a doctor in Holland named Pim van Lommel. Have you heard of him? He was a cardiologist. I guess he's still a cardiologist, but in his work as a cardiologist, he had patients who suffered, what do they call it, cardiac arrest, which means that for a period of time, they stop breathing, heart stops, brain stops, everything stops. So it's like they're dead for a few minutes, or and I don't know what's the maximum amount of time, but anyway, there's a period of time when they're like dead. And then sometimes they come back to life, they were revived. And he started hearing stories from his patients who'd been through a cardiac arrest of experiences that they had while they were supposedly dead. Now this is, you've probably heard of this before, right? They call it near-death experience. Near-death experiences, NDEs. So he wasn't like the first person to discover this, but he just became very, very interested in it, and decided to stop working as a cardiologist and then just totally devote himself to doing research into near-death experiences. And he spent something like 15 years doing really thorough research into near-death experiences, and in the end published a book. I haven't read his book, but apparently it was a really popular book and stirred up a lot of discussion about this. And anyone who's interested in more of this, I'll pass a piece of paper around. You can write down your email, and I can send you links to him and talks that he on YouTube. He's actually quite impressive to listen to, and he has a website as well. And there's some other material as well, which I'll talk about. So you can write your email address if you're interested. Yeah. There's just too much material to be able to cover it all in the class, but I can point you out. So that's one source of material that might help you to be more accepting of the possibility of some continuation of consciousness after death. He himself was totally convinced of it because he says, listening to all these people talking about those experiences that they have, it's undeniable. And sometimes it can actually be verified. I mean, a lot of people have these experiences like going through a tunnel, seeing God and so forth. Some people have experiences where their mind or their consciousness is floating outside of their body and still in the room where they are, which could be the emergency room, the hospital room. And they're watching what's going on, what the doctors and nurses are doing, hearing what they're saying. And then when they come back into their body, they can explain everything that happened and it can be verified. So that's definitely evidence that they were not dead in the sense that nothing was happening. Their consciousness was still active, even though the brain wasn't working, brain wasn't functioning, but the consciousness was still aware and able to know what was going on, and that could be verified. So that shows it's not just hallucination, and not just hallucinating, they're actually experiencing real events. And then another source of material is people who can remember past lives. And there's lots of those. Lots of books, lots of YouTube videos. Some of them, I don't know whether they're really genuine or not, but there's one that I heard about just a couple of years ago. And again, I'll send you the link for this if you're interested. This little boy in America, born in Louisiana, and he was the only child of his parents, so he was the first child they had. And when he was about 2 years old, he started having nightmares almost every night. It was the same nightmare again and again. He'd wake up screaming and he'd say he was dreaming that he was inside of a plane and the plane was on fire and he couldn't get out. So he had the same nightmare again and again and again. And at one point, the little boy's mother, the grandmother, said, maybe he's remembering a past life. And this was something the parents never thought of. They didn't believe in past life, so that was not at all their idea. But then they got in touch with a woman who does a lot of research into children who remember past lives. And she said, maybe it would be good to ask him to tell more about the story. What's going on? So they did. They got him to talk about it more. And he started giving information and names and places and so on. And the father started doing research into it. And in the end, to make a long story short, it seems that this little boy was the reincarnation of a World War II pilot, an American pilot who served in the Pacific or Japan, and his plane was shot down in sea off of Japan. So the little boy remembered the name, his own name when he was this pilot. He remembered the name of the boat, the ship that he flew off of, the type of plane that he flew. He knew all about this type of plane. He said, this plane isn't very good because it's always getting flat tires. And whatever he said turned out to be true. And names of his fellow pilots, and some of them were still alive, and we could verify the story and so on. So, there's a lot of people who can say, oh, I remember past life, blah, 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 blah. But it's not always possible to actually trace that information, and find the actual person they were talking about. But in this case, it was possible. And so there's a nice little video. It's only about 15 minutes long about this story, this little boy and his parents and so on. And it's very hard to come up with some other explanation. How would this little boy have this information? And skeptics will say, well, the parents just told him. The parents, got all this information and then told the little kid. But why would they do that? What would be the point of doing something like that? I suppose just to get attention, maybe. But anyway, the parents say, no, that's not true. We didn't know any of this stuff before he started talking about it. So, and there's an American professor, he's passed away now, but he spent many years, maybe something like 40 years, doing research into cases of people who could remember past lives. His name was Ian Stevenson, and he's also written a number of books, and he's also on YouTube if you're interested. And he was a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia. So he collected thousands of cases of people who could remember past lives, many of them children, but some adults as well. And so there is a lot of that kind of material available. There's also another American, there's a psychiatrist named Brian Weiss. Have you heard of him? Brian Weiss. So he sort of accidentally came across reincarnation through one of his patients, a patient that he was trying to treat, who was having a woman who was having a lot of problems, and he tried for years. He was trying to help her with her problems, but wasn't completely successful. And then he tried hypnotizing her, and under hypnosis, she started remembering past lives. And he was skeptical at first, oh no. He didn't really believe in past lives. But then one day she said something about a child that he had who died when he was just very young, some years ago, and also something about his father who had also died. And there was no way she would have known about these two people and what she said about them. So it really kind of woke him up and made him more open to the idea of reincarnation. So since that time, he has helped a lot of people deal with their problems through past life therapy, remembering their past lives. And he's written a number of books about it and very interesting stories. So anyway, there's these different sources of information. And what I encourage people to do is to, even if you do have difficulty believing in reincarnation, try to at least keep an open mind. Try to, think, well, maybe it's true. I don't know. It could be true. I can't be sure. Because if you ask yourself, can it be proven that there is no reincarnation? Is there absolute hard and fast proof that there's no reincarnation? There's no continuation of any part of oneself, part of one's mind after death. As far as I know, there isn't. There is no actual proof. And apparently the Dalai Lama said that if someone can prove to him that reincarnation doesn't exist, then he'll go along with that. He has a very open mind, and he talks to scientists, and so far no one has managed to prove that it doesn't exist. It's mainly just a theory, the theory that mind or consciousness is totally dependent on the brain. And without the brain functioning, there's no mind, no consciousness. So many people believe this is a fact, but it's actually a theory. It's not a fact. Just a theory. And then for sure, there's a lot of evidence that shows the interconnection, interdependence between the mind and the brain, because certain types of chemicals or drugs, substances induced into the brain will change the way our mind works. But it's also the other way around. There's also evidence that by changing our mind, we change our brain. Right? They've been doing a lot of research on meditators, people who practice meditation, and they can find that doing meditation does change your brain. So if the mind is totally dependent on the brain, how is it possible to change the brain by changing the mind? Doesn't that itself kind of put a hole in that theory that mind is just a product of the brain, a function of the brain? Anyway, so just try to keep an open mind and explore this material. Also, one thing that I think is, when people demand some kind of hard and fast proof about reincarnation or continuation of consciousness, it's actually not really possible to have concrete proof, because what we're talking about is an internal experience. We're talking about the mind, the consciousness, which is not a physical thing. It's a non-physical thing. So it's like what's going on in a person's mind. And so it would be like if you had a dream, let's say last night you had some kind of dream, and you try to tell somebody about your dream, and the person says, I don't believe you. Show me proof. Prove to me that you had that dream. Would you be able to do that? Or if you have some experience in meditation, maybe you have some really nice experience in your meditation, and you tell somebody about it, and they say, I don't believe you. How do I know this is true? Prove it to me. We cannot give proof of something that exists in our own mind, something that is an internal experience. So it's the same with somebody who is able to remember a previous life, who has memories of a past life. We can't expect that person to give us some kind of concrete material proof of that. And of course, there are people who have hallucinations whose minds may not work properly, and the mind just might be creating something that isn't true. So I'm not saying we have to believe that everything people say is absolutely true. So what kind of criterion might we use to know if some internal experience is really true, is valid, or is it imaginary? And one way is evidence. Like, it is sometimes possible to do research into the material, like with this little boy. His father did research and found out there really was such a person, who fit the description of the child. And the Dalai Lama tells the story of a little girl that he met in India. And this little girl, again, was talking about her previous life, and she gave very, very detailed descriptions about her family and her home and all this material. She kept talking about this, and the parents finally said, okay, we have to look into it. So they actually went to the place where the child said. It was far away, it wasn't nearby. And they found there really was, this family, and they had a little girl, and the little girl had died in a bus accident, and so on. So all the material turned out to be true, just as the little girl said. So in the end, this little girl had two sets of parents. From this life, the parents of this life, and also the parents of the previous life, who had lost their little girl and missed her very much. So now she was back again. So sometimes it is possible to actually find the person, who this new person remembers. But another way to check would be to just check what is the effect of having this experience. Being able to remember a past life, or in the case of near-death experience, it's people who have, seem to die for a period of time and then come back again. Does it have any kind of beneficial effects on the person? So Pim Van Lommel, this doctor in Holland, says that many people who've had a near-death experience come back with a very different state of mind than they had before. It's very common for them to not be afraid of death anymore, because they've been through this really wonderful experience. They realize, well, death isn't something to be afraid of. And another common experience they have is that they realize that what's really important in life is to be loving and caring to others as much as possible, and not harm them, and not be all greedy and materialistic, but to really use your life in a very loving and kind, caring, compassionate way. So many people, if not all people who go through this kind of experience, come out with a lot of beneficial results in their life. So that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. Okay, so that's just a little bit about reincarnation. And then with regard to karma, so karma also plays a role in this whole picture, this whole explanation of things. So the Buddhist explanation is that what is the cause for us to be born in whatever place, in whatever family, whatever situation, and have whatever experiences we do is our karma. It's not the case. I mean, there's some people who have this idea that we get to choose where we are born. We choose our rebirth. We choose our life. We choose our family. We choose our experiences. But that kind of, well, Buddhism really doesn't talk about that except with bodhisattvas. Highly accomplished, highly realized beings who have this incredible compassion and love. So they will choose where to go. And their whole motivation isn't just to have a good time, but to be able to be in the world and help others. But for ordinary people, then we don't have much choice. We're kind of propelled by our karma, whatever karma is most strong. So if you think about it, if it really was a question of choice, then why would people choose to be born in horrible situations where there's war, there's poverty and starvation, famine, all these kinds of horrible problems? Why would people choose to live there and to go through those terrible experiences and sometimes not even survive? So many children die because of war, because of famine, because of poverty. They don't even manage to live a full life. So, who would choose that? If you really had a choice, would you choose to be born in that kind of situation? And then people say, well, you have to learn something. You're born in that situation because you have to learn something. But then if that was really the case, what about people who are born in situations like that? And what they learn is to become angry, to become violent, to become a murderer, a terrorist, a rapist, and an abuser. So, where's the learning there? Born into that situation and they come out, with more negativity, more suffering, creating more suffering for themselves and others. So this idea of choosing one's rebirth seems a little not so realistic to me. Then, so Buddhism says it's up to our karma. It's the karma that we have that determines where we're born and what experiences we have. But then karma is not an easy subject. It's very complicated. And there's a lot of details. But basically, we talk about, sometimes it's called good karma and bad karma, or skillful and unskillful, wholesome and unwholesome. Different terminology is used, but basically there's karma that leads to good experiences. So we can call that positive or skillful. So that is karma or actions that bring about results which are good, which are positive, which are beneficial, which are happy. And then there's other karma which brings about problems and pain and suffering and all the things that we don't want, all the bad experiences. But when it comes to determining whether an action is good or bad, skillful or unskillful, it's not so black and white, because it depends on so many different factors, such as our motivation. What is the motivation we have for doing the action? That's said to be one of the main factors. Sometimes you might do an action that on the outside looks like a good action, but you might be doing with bad motivation. Or the other way around. You might be doing an action that looks not so good, but you're doing it with a good motivation. So motivation is very, very important. And other factors are whether you're in a sane state of mind or insane. So it's just like in the legal system, if you're completely out of your mind is out of balance, then you're not judged in the same way as someone who's totally sane, totally in control of their mind. How you go about doing it, what methods you use to do it, how you feel afterwards, whether you feel good about it or you feel regret, the type of object that's involved. So they say, for example, doing something to your guru or your teacher, your parents, people who have been really helpful and kind to you, becomes more heavy than doing something to someone who hasn't been so kind to you. I mean, both are negative, but there's difference in terms of heaviness and lightness. Or if you steal somebody's precious diamond wedding ring, as opposed to stealing a paperclip. So there would be a difference there in heaviness. So it's a very complicated subject, but I'm not going into all the details. But one thing we need to understand is that it's a natural law. We sometimes call it the law of cause and effect. But when we use the word law, we have to be careful and not think that karma is the kind of law that was just invented by somebody or produced by somebody, created by somebody. So it's not like man-made laws or God-made laws. It's not Buddha who made up karma, who created karma and then, judges us according to that. Not like that. It's more like a natural law, like the law of gravity. And the Buddha just discovered it. The Buddha, well, he didn't discover it because it was already something believed and talked about before the Buddha's time. But anyway, he simply explained the law of karma and how it works according to his experience. And so instead of thinking, I'm just saying this because people, especially if you come from a Judeo-Christian background, we sometimes look at karma and feel as though it's the same as the 10 Commandments. And there's this set of laws, set of rules, we have to obey them, and if we don't, we're going to be punished by somebody. So we need to put that idea aside and understand more like just the laws of nature. Like, for example, when it comes to eating food, consuming foods and drinks and so on, some foods and drinks are good for us, nutritious. If we bring them into our bodies, consume them, then they'll nourish us, make us healthy, help us live long, and so on. Other types of foods and drinks are poisonous, toxic, bad for us. If we put them inside of us, they'll poison us, they'll harm us, we'll get sick, we might even die. And so this is just a natural thing. It's a natural process. Certain types of food have one effect, other types of food have another effect. And it's not that if we eat something poisonous and then get sick, it's not that somebody's punishing us. We're not being punished for that. It's just the natural effect of something we ourselves have done. So it's the same with karma. If we do something positive, skillful, wholesome, then that's like eating nourishing food. We'll have beneficial effects as a result of that. On the other hand, we do something harmful, negative, like killing or stealing or harming others, then that's like eating poisonous food. So we have done something that's naturally going to bring about problems for ourselves. So it's more that we are the ones in control. We are the ones responsible for what we do. And there's no external judge or one who either punishes or gives us reward depending on our actions. Does that make sense? I mean, you may know this, but it doesn't hurt to say it because people do sometimes kind of superimpose Judeo-Christian ideas onto Buddhist ideas, which isn't appropriate. Also, karma isn't fate. That's another misunderstanding people sometimes get, that if you do some action, then that's it. It's like you're doomed to go through some terrible experience. There's nothing you can do about it. So that isn't the case. It is possible to change karma, to work on karma. So even if you do something really terrible, even if you're a mass murderer, and there are stories in the Buddhist history of mass murderers, and they were able to purify that karma and even attain enlightenment in the same lifetime. So, so there's no karma that is so terrible, so bad that it can't be cleared up, repaired, purified. So there's practices we can do to purify bad karma. But it also works on the other side with good karma or positive karma, skillful karma. That can be damaged or destroyed. So we have to be careful, try to avoid doing that. And they say the usual way that good karma is destroyed is by getting angry. That's why they say anger is such a harmful thing. Depending on how much we get angry and then who we get angry at, how long we're angry for, and so on. So that I think of it like a forest fire. Sometimes you have this beautiful forest. It's taken a long time to grow, and sometimes just a spark from a cigarette or a match or something can set that forest on fire and just within a very short time destroy all those beautiful trees. So they say anger has a similar kind of effect on our positive karma, our good karma. Just within a very short time, it can be destroyed by anger. So they say it's really good to try to work on your anger and not let it take over you and destroy your good karma. But it's also said that if we dedicate, when we do something positive, create some merit, good karma, that we dedicate that. And the best dedication is to dedicate it to becoming enlightened. So we dedicate that positive energy that it will help us reach enlightenment, to help all living beings. And so if we do that, then that good karma, that merit, that positive energy will be protected, preserved, and not destroyed. And then when it comes to which kinds of actions are positive and which ones are negative, the basic criteria is whether they bring about suffering or happiness for oneself or others. So those that bring about suffering are unskillful. Those that bring about happiness are skillful, positive. But since we can't, most of us can't see the future, we can't see what's coming in the future, so we don't really know what will be the long-term effects of our actions. So the Buddha did give some advice about, generally what actions, like killing. He gave a list of 10 actions that we should try to avoid. I went through these already when I explained the Eightfold Path. So killing, stealing, lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. Those are the 3 actions of the body, physical actions that are the most negative, most unskillful. And then with speech, it's lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and gossip. 4 types of speech that are harmful. And then with the mind, it's covetousness, wanting to own something that belongs to somebody else and starting to think about how you can get it for yourself. Ill will or malice, which is thinking about how you can hurt somebody. You can plot a murder or plot some, awful thing you can do that will cause somebody else suffering. So even if you never actually do it, just engaging in that kind of mental activity is negative. And then wrong use, which is to reject certain ideas that are important, that are crucial for our spiritual development, like to say, there's no such thing as enlightenment, there's no such thing as karma, like totally rejecting, not just having doubt, but just saying no way, just closing your mind to those ideas. So that's considered unskillful, because then you're not even open to the possibility of following the spiritual path and working for these higher states of mind. So Buddha pointed out these 10 actions that we should try to avoid, and by avoiding those, we automatically create the 10 positive, skillful actions. So it's not that difficult to create skillful or positive karma. All we have to do is decide not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, and so forth. Just avoiding those deliberately, consciously, because we see that they are harmful. Just by that, we can create positive karma. But there's also other ways to create positive karma, helping people, giving gifts, donations, and so forth. Doing meditation, studying. So the Buddhist path then involves trying our best to refrain from doing negative, harmful, unskillful things, trying to do positive, skillful things as much as we can. But ultimately, the real goal is to become free completely from karma and having to take rebirth and all the disturbing emotions in the mind and so forth. So that's what we call nirvana or liberation or enlightenment. So these states of freedom, states of real peace and freedom and happiness do exist and are possible. So someone following the Buddhist path would be aiming for those states. But realistically, it could take quite a while to reach those states. And in the meantime, while we're on the way, we try to behave is in a skillful and positive, beneficial way as we can, and refrain from the negative, harmful things. Okay, so that's just a brief explanation of those two topics of reincarnation and karma. And then next week I will get to this topic of love and compassion, and more specifically the 4 measurable thoughts. Talk about that next week. So it's love, compassion, equanimity, and joy. And so that's actually, this topic of the 4 measurables is common to both the Theravada tradition and the Mahayana tradition. So both emphasize the importance of cultivating those states of mind. Okay, any questions?
When you talked about the law of karma, you said that motivation, the way I heard it, motivation is above the cause of an action. Or something like that. Is above in a kind of jurisdiction of it.
Yeah.
It is
more important.
Yeah.
Than
the cause of the action, the motivation behind it, or it is.
Well, what I meant was not so much the cause, but the actual action itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because like generally we say that killing is a negative thing to do, but there might be instances where a person might do an act of killing with a really positive, pure motivation. So, I mean, it's hard, but yeah, if the motivation is really pure and positive and free of any kind of delusion, then even an act of killing might be not so negative. I mean, it's still negative, but like the example they give of this some previous life of the Buddha, when he came to know that this man was plotting a murder. He's plotting to kill 500 people. And he really investigated to see how he could prevent this crime from happening, and found there was no way he could prevent it except to kill this person. So he did it, knowing it was wrong to kill, and willing to take on whatever suffering he would experience as a result of that, but out of compassion for the people who would be killed otherwise, and also out of compassion for this would-be murderer, realizing that he would create such terrible karma for himself. So he willingly took on that karma. So it said that because his mind was so pure, so free of any kind of ego, any kind of delusion, that action actually became something positive rather than negative. But this is a really tricky thing, we have to be, careful about that. But I'm just saying that's an example or an illustration to show how the motivation can override the action, which might be naturally negative, but if it's done with a really pure motivation, then it doesn't become so negative. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. But in the case of where the outfall of the action is not what was meant, is not what was intended, but there was still a good intention. And what I heard you say that in that case, that would even in a way lower the kind of effect that would have on your karma or something like that.
Yeah, the karma would not be so heavy if it's done with a pure motivation, positive motivation. You have difficulty with that?
I don't know. I think it's kind of I don't know, in a way I guess I have kind of this mindset that it could be that motivation can be an excuse, and it's kind of your you kind of have to it's kind of your job to try to think about what the eventual outfall of your actions could be, even though you have whatever motivation.
Yeah, for sure. We're not. Buddhism isn't saying that you can invent a positive motivation and then use that as an excuse to do all kinds of misbehavior. It doesn't mean that. You still have to, really try your best to refrain from doing things that are harmful and try to do things that are beneficial. And also, you have to be really sincere about your motivation. What is your real motivation? Because you might have, on the surface, you might think, well, I'm doing this for the other person's benefit. But deep down inside, your ulterior motivation is you're doing it for yourself, or you're doing it for some other reason. So it's not just talking about a pretend motivation, but the real, genuine motivation. So I'm just saying that's only one factor, but there are other factors as well to take into consideration. And I mean, the guideline is to try to have a good motivation for the things that we do, try to do good things as much as we can, but sometimes we find ourselves in situations where it's a little sticky or a little unclear. I mean, I'm thinking more in terms of like wanting to help people, but sometimes you don't always know what is the right way to help them, But if you have the motivation to help and you really are trying to act sincerely for the other person's benefit, you might make a mistake. Yeah, you might do the wrong thing, but you can at least think, well, I meant well. I was trying to be helpful. I can say that about myself. I mean, I do that sometimes. I can really say, I really sincerely wanted to benefit. I didn't want to hurt, but because of my lack of wisdom, and I didn't say the right thing, or I didn't do the right thing. So, but at least my motivation was good. I can be sure of that. So. Something to think about. Yeah.
I think for me, anger is really tricky, because I know that it creates bad karma to get angry, even inside your head. You said, but what if one is angry? Like, what are the best way of handling that? Or
yeah. Well, I'm going to be talking about this sometime later.
Yeah.
A couple of evenings, just talking about how to work with different disturbing emotions and anger in particular. I mean, for sure, we have to be real and honest and acknowledge the anger and not pretend that it's not there. But then, I guess in the Buddhist tradition, we would say, well, let's try to find a way of working with this anger in such a way that I don't just blast out and hurt somebody, and also not hurt myself, but try to transform, because there's a lot of energy there, a lot of energy behind anger. So if we can try to work with that energy and use it in some sort of constructive way rather than a destructive way, and also do some analysis, you know, like why am I angry? Where is this coming from? And not just blindly follow it. So there's many different things you can do with anger. It's actually, there's whole books just about how to deal with anger.
But I'm also asking the same questions in different. I've asked the same question to other teachers because I think it's a very important question. Like, what do you do? And I think a lot of people find it difficult to handle that kind of emotion. So yeah, but I know that there must be different answers to it.
Yeah. And something popped in there. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, I was going to say, the Buddhist approach seems to be mainly being your own therapist, you know, just sitting on your meditation cushion and working it out yourself. Although, of course, like in Tibet, for example, people would go to talk to their teacher if they have a problem, and the teacher would give advice. So you could try either way. You know, try working on it on your own, but if that doesn't work, if you need help, then it's fine to go and ask for help to a therapist or a lama or a meditation teacher. You know, I mean, ultimately, you're the one that has to do the work, but it can be helpful to get advice, input from other people. Sometimes, you know, just by yourself, it's like you're just going around and around in circles, and it's hard to see a way out, but somebody else can help you to find a way out. But I see working with these kind of emotions like anger and so on as a lifelong thing. You know, it's not like, oh, you do that for a few years and then you're finished with it, work on. But it's, you know, ongoing. And also I find sometimes new things appearing that I didn't see before. You know, so it's like going deeper and deeper in the mind and discovering more and more layers of different kinds of emotions that need to be worked on. So it's kind of interesting in a way. It's very interesting, very useful as well to learn. Because if you can learn how to work on these emotions in yourself, then you're in a better position to help other people who are going through them as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, in a couple of weeks, we'll be getting to that particular subject and focusing just on that.
I will be here.
Yeah, this is on the board over there. There's a schedule when I'm going to be talking about different things. So I'm going to have to finish now. I want to try to catch the train. So let's just take a few moments to make a dedication of our positive energy from what we did here tonight in meditation and listening to, thinking about, talking about this talk. So may this be helpful for all of us to have more positive thoughts and feelings and experiences, and for our life to go in a positive direction. May it be beneficial for others as well. May it benefit all other people, all other beings all over the world. Help bring about more peace and happiness, less suffering, and help us all get closer to enlightenment. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Just 1 second. I would like to remind you, all of you, and especially if you've been here the first time, thank you for your visits, for being here. It's always open for anyone who wants to come to listen to the teachings and sit and meditate. And you may not know that the center runs completely on donations for paying whatever we have to pay, both rent, electricity, and so on. So you are very welcome to donate what you can. We suggest a donation for these evenings of 60 crowns, but anything from 1 crown to 15,000 tonight is happily accepted. And we have also mobile pay that is in the entrance. If you would like to donate volunteering, as I say, the center runs volunteer work. You're very welcome to contact any of the volunteers and hear how you can do that. So in that way, you also make sure that you come to your meditation class if you volunteer. And thank you for coming tonight, and thank you, Sangye, for teaching us.